social media, all it takes nowadays to spark up an online fight is to merely have an opinion. One opinion will cause many to spiral into a pit hole of anger where no one dialogues, only insults the person who has the unpopular or even the popular opinion regarding the latest trends in comic books, movies, or pulp culture. It makes sense given the circumstance. After all, acting tough behind the protective wall of the black mirror we all own and use on a daily basis makes it easy for anyone to jump right into a tirade of insults and threats. Again, just for having an opinion that they may disagree with. I decided to go against that notion. I've decided to start a video series where we discuss the hot topic issues within the comic book industry and pulp culture and provide you with another perspective. One of logic, reason, with just plain old dialogue between two people who have different opinions. My co-host and I will discuss the pulp culture topics at hand in a fun, engaging, and respectable manner. So, without further ado, let's talk about it.
In a lot of terms, I think it's good. And one of the things I try to shy kids away from too is I go, I can draw 2 books. I could draw 3. I'm fast. I believe you should do 1 dynamite book instead of 3 average books, because in the long run, it's going to pay off for you.
Couldn't agree with you more.
And what ends up happening is that people sometimes water themselves down. And so could I draw this a faster way? You darn right. So I could cross the lines. I could do this. I didn't even have to draw this. This is a heck of a lot faster, XXXX. But I figured if I did something that's a little bit different, again, my career was budding. I had to let people notice me so that I get another job. Is if I labor over this today, down the line, I think it will pay dividends down the line. A lot of people seem to be short-sighted on a lot of things. So
how does it feel to know that someday in the future they'll talk of you as the man who popularized 3-dimensional perspective webbing? I mean, boy, that's a distinctive trait. Nobody else will have anything like that.
Well, I guess the one thing that would be nice about it is I wanted to do a body of work on Spider-Man, and I felt that Steve Ditko, who we were talking about earlier, and John Romita both were on the books long enough that they did a body of work. That it would be nice, if nothing else, that 25 years from now, when they throw out 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 names on Spider-Man on the artistic side of it, that maybe my name might also be in there because I added something to that character. You know what I mean?
Well, you certainly did.
That maybe something will be there that somebody can come along. On the downside, I hate to say it, Stan, on the downside is because it becomes so popular, a lot of the people following now in the Spider-Man steps were they wanted me to draw like John Romita, and I said no, again, out of respect. If I was younger, I probably would have done it. But again, I was at that cocky stage going, no, I want to do it my way or the highway. That kids are now starting to come in there and starting to draw it their own way. And I'd like to caution kids, just because Todd did something popular or whoever else, do it your own way, because you might do something that might be 10 times more popular that nobody's thought of yet. And if you just keep emulating what's been down, you're never going to come up with that one that we go, oh, why didn't I think of that first?
I think that's probably the most important thing that we've been saying and you've been repeating during this particular show, and that is to do it their own way, whatever they do. Do it the best they can in their own style, because when you copy someone else, the best that you can be is a good copy.
Now, I'll go over a couple of the techniques that some of the kids.
Hello, everyone. Welcome
Still
back.
playing. Okay.
Yeah. Welcome back to Let's Talk About It. What happened to the comic book superstar? Now, what you saw there was an old clip of, I think it was called The Comic Book Greats with Stan Lee. And here he was interviewing Todd McFarlane on his way to the top of the success mountain. Stan Lee was at that point already a legend. And so now Todd McFarlane is a legend in his own right. Yeah. But I shared that clip.
So young there.
Yeah, I know, right? I shared that clip because the topic today is what happened to the comic book superstar. And of course, we could discuss as to what we think happened, or, if you're listening to the show, share your thoughts in the chat. We'd like to hear them. But I shared this clip because I feel it resonated with me in a lot of ways. And also it fit with the theme of the show. The fact that Todd McFarlane Even though he was kind of, taking up he was soaking in the praise from Stan Lee. He had a great point about being yourself and doing it your own style. And even though he did his own take on Spider-Man, which pretty much it like ballooned the sales of Spider-Man at the time, he still reminded future artists that, hey, even though I did it this way, you still go and do it yourself and be great in your own right. But yeah, that's why I shared it, because I thought it was very good. But Kyle, how was your week, man? How's everything?
Oh, it's been good, reading more comic books, and going through my backlog of collection and trying to go through it and organize it. A little harder with the broken hand, but
Right.
we're working, we're going through it. What about you? Have you picked up anything good this?
I did. I picked up Amazing Spider-Man, an old issue from 1982, drawn by John Romita Jr. and written by Roger Stern. It's I forgot the number of the issue, but it's the one where Spider-Man faces Juggernaut, and I haven't read it yet. I just kind of skimmed through the pages, and the pages are amazing. And I picked up a few other older books because, again, every Wednesday I go to the shop hoping one of the new issues can pull me in and have me pick up the book, and nothing really pops. Nothing really pops to me other than the stuff.
There's a few exceptions.
A few exceptions, but that shouldn't be the case when you're shopping for new comics. It should be, if anything, it should be, I can't pick this one up because I can't afford to. It's beyond my budget. But now it's like,
or it's sold out.
Or sold out, yeah, because they under ordered the book, and I missed out on it because I'm working when they open, and I'm sure there's fans or readers that are there when they open and they pick up the books. But so far so good. I mean, I've been busy with my own stuff and all that, but you prompted a question about the state of the industry, and also the lack of superstars, which got me thinking. I was like, you're right. There's not really a lot of superstars, right? And then on top of that, then it led to almost like a rabbit hole of like, well, what constitutes a superstar? What is a superstar? How does a superstar come to be especially in our industry? Not our industry, the comic book industry.
It's our industry.
I make it like it's ours. Yeah, it's ours.
We're the king of the comic book industries here. Yeah.
In the comic book industry, right? And it's a very small industry, but we still have our superstars, just like in every industry, right? Whether it's you work in law, there's lawyers who are reputed to be, that guy is like badass lawyer, whatever, on this whatever case. Wrestling, pro wrestling, which is my favorite thing. There are stars there. There's stars in movies, TV, and the list goes on and on.
Novels. Yeah,
and so that begged the question. It's like, I remember when I was collecting comic books actively 20, 30 years ago, there would be superstars, right? I knew of Frank Miller. I knew of Stan Lee. I knew of Jack Kirby and Walt Simonson and Rob Liefeld, Jim Lee. I mean, the list goes on. There's always a like a larger than life factor when it came to finding out the names of the people who wrote your favorite comic books. And I feel like today it lacks that. It doesn't have that. There's no sense of like, with obviously a few exceptions, which we'll probably mention in the show. But there's none of that anymore. There's not many quote unquote modern superstars. Of course, there's superstars of yesterday, right? You go to a comic book convention, and of course you're gonna have familiar names that are going to be there. But I'm talking about people of today, artists who are actively working today for Marvel, DC, Image Comics, Dark Horse. It seems like everyone, they all got their spots, which is great. But in my opinion, okay, I mean, of course, that's it's up for debate, but they're not at superstar level for me. Again, with few exceptions.
Well,
so
what do you think? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, that's
go ahead.
Basically what that prompted the question was when I was thinking back to San Diego Comic-Con.
Right.
And I hear about stories and talking to people in lines and stuff like that. And I never actually did get a chance to meet Stan Lee in person, because I didn't really get into comic books just until a couple years ago, and he passed away a few years before that. So unfortunately, I never actually got to meet him. But just in terms of the scope and scale of his popularity, it just seemed like that was just a whole nother level.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
the only, when I was at the San Diego Comic Con this last, just a few months ago, I was noticing that like there really isn't that many people that are commanding these huge, larger than life lines that you would see for like a Stan Lee.
Right.
You get like the one that was pretty much the most popular was like Todd McFarlane. And that's understandable because Todd McFarlane is Todd McFarlane.
Yeah.
But like
he had to work to get that. That's
I
the
had
thing.
to, yes. It was like, and there's the book right there that I got him sign. That was I didn't go through any lines of. You can go watch a video discussing how I got the signature. But besides the point, if I hadn't just run into him to get to sign it, I would have had to have lines, like get chances for lines, to get lottery system type stuff, just to get a chance to meet him.
Right.
And there's only like one other person I can think of that was similar to that would have been Jim Lee. He was similar way, but that sort of prompted me to think about like, well, I mean, these guys, most of these guys like Rob Liefeld and Jim Lee, Todd McFarlane, they were already all superstars, back in the 1990s. That was 25 years ago.
Right.
Where's some of these other bigger name artists and writers and stuff like that that should be commanding these 2-hour, 3-hour plus long lines? I'm not seeing that many. Like, yeah, you see some that have, lines and stuff like that, but not to the level that these other creators have. And even so, they're still not even at that level that Stan Lee was. Like, we were thinking about it the other, while we were talking about this. If you go up to like 10 random people, if say that they like comic book movies and stuff like that, but they don't really know the books or anything like that. They just like the movies and stuff like that. You ask them, have you heard of Stan Lee? Most of the time they'll say, yeah, I know Stan Lee. He's Marvel guy. It's like that. But then if you ask them, okay, well, do you know who Todd McFarlane is? Probably some of them might know him because of like the toys and stuff like that. And he's a little, he's more popular. You ask them Rob Liefeld, they'll probably understand because that's, maybe they'll understand that that's the Deadpool guy. But besides that, who else? You go ask them, oh, do you know who John Romita Jr. is? No.
More likely not.
Do you know who Scotty Young is?
Well, Stan Lee is the exception to the rule because he, popularized himself by as Halloweener says here, his movie cameos. So the more he did the cameos, the more the movie going audience started to remember and recognize Stan Lee as the guy who created the characters of the movie that they're watching. And so that's an exception, just like that's crossing the threshold, right? When I mentioned to you, going back to wrestling, you never watch pro wrestling, right? You don't like it. It's something that doesn't interest you. That's fine. But when I mention the name Hulk Hogan, you know who I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, I know Hulk Hogan.
And John Cena, right?
Yeah, John Cena.
Yeah, because they're the exceptions to the rule. They got to the point where they crossed that threshold. But within the comic book industry, they're superstars. They're well known. And Halloweener here says, but Stan Lee was really popular before his cameo. Yeah, of course not. He wasn't until the movie cameos. But the reason why, this is my own take on it. The reason why Stan Lee is a legend, I mean, part of it is because he helped create, obviously, the most popular comic book characters in pop culture. But that's a whole different discussion for a whole different video. But the reason why I think he remained is because he was famous for traveling the country and talking in college campuses and convincing a bunch of aspiring artists in that was studying art in college to do comic books, because that was a whole avenue of revenue that they could get, a livelihood they can get for themselves. And I think that's something that Stan Lee should be revered for, that he went out there and he not only went to bat for the Marvel brand, he went to bat for the medium, the comic book medium and the industry as a whole, which I thought is, I think
Right.
most people who have gained success in the comic book industry should give back by doing that kind of thing. But again, that's another topic for another video. But speaking of Halloweener, he mentioned something that was interesting here that I liked, this tweet here. Let me see if I can zoom in so you guys can see it better. There we go. So he posted this earlier when I posted this for our ad for the show, and I thought it was a really good point here. And I'm going to read it out. He says, Sean Murphy comes to mind. A lot of people seem to like Daniel Warren Johnson, which I think, in my opinion, he's definitely getting there. Like he's definitely proven that he's unique. His art style is very different from what's the norm, and that helps him stand out. And that's always an important factor, is that you got to stand out in order for you to get noticed by most people. And there are others.
But
Go
even so, side note, little note about with the Sean Murphy though. Even still, like I went to a convention with Sean Murphy there, and he was just sitting at his table. There was a little bit of a line at times,
Right.
but besides that, he didn't have like a huge long 20
Right.
long line.
Right.
Unlike Frank Miller, that was also at that convention, who had like a 2-hour wait line.
I see.
So
I mean, there's levels of
right.
Stardom. Let's face the facts there. So he goes on to say the comic book superstar really came about during Wizard magazine, and that was at a time when access to media was very limited before the internet, which is absolutely true. And now that we are awash with endless content and creators practically screaming for our attention, guilty, the extraordinarily pearls are drowned out in the sea. And also because the barrier to entry has been leveled by social media, there are multitudes of extraordinary talent that don't seem so extraordinary now, because there are simply so many of which would have blown those other superstars away back on that limited stage. And this is likely why those former superstars are mostly revered by the middle-aged who experienced and engaged in such celebrity worship back in their youth. So I thought that was a very interesting observation there by Halloweener, which I agree with for the most part, because yeah, he's right. Back then, there's no social media, so there was a lot more control as to how you present yourself publicly. And Wizard magazine was the magazine that if you got spotlighted there, your stock went up in the eyes of new readers who maybe didn't know of your work yet, because they were collecting other books and they're focused on that. But then now they got their attention from reading an article, a spotlight article, or maybe you were listed as a top 10 creator, because that's what they had in the end of their magazine, top 10 writers, top 10 artists, and they saw your name on there and went like, oh, okay, well, I'm gonna check out this person's work. And now you potentially gain a new fan because of that. But like you said here, that's gone now that Wizard magazine is gone,
Right.
Because that's how I discovered a lot of my favorite writers and artists was through Wizard magazine, when they had articles that spotlighted certain people that I never heard of.
And you basically become my Wizard magazine.
Yeah.
Like basically anytime that I like have questions or something like that, or you see a post or something like that, you're like, hey, look at this guy. I remember this guy. I'm like, who's that guy? You're like, oh
Yeah,
man,
right.
you gotta go pick this up.
Yeah, I essentially was the person who passed down all the knowledge to you and wised you up to all the stuff, all the good stuff that I think that's what a lot of older comic book readers need to educate the new comic book readers of, is I guess exposing you to actual quality work. Because when you're exposed to average, sub-average work, which unfortunately that's what your generation is experiencing, it's still good, but it's not exceptional, or it's not above average, in my opinion. Again, I could you get this up for debate,
because you're an old fart.
because I'm an old fart, right? Yeah, and all that. But your palate tends to underdevelop in a lot of ways, because then you don't have the access to the quality work that came before it. You know what I mean? And since there's no Wizard magazine anymore, there's websites and what have you that have top 10 lists of stuff,
but they're all fragmented, and they're all
exactly
separate places.
Yeah, and there's no centralized place where you can all meet up and go, oh, okay, this is pretty cool. I'm gonna check it out. Now it's all, yeah, like you said, decentralized. One website says this book is crap. The other website here says that the same book is absolutely exceptional. And now there's confusion as to what's
what
good
is
and what's
it?
not good. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And now you're unsure as to whether or not you want to pick up the book because you like this website a little bit more than the other website that said that this book is good. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So objectivity is important in order for like word of mouth to be, I guess you could say, worthwhile. So that's what I do when I pass on my knowledge to you. Is I just tell you, well, I thought this was great. You should check it out, and you could determine on your own whether or not you think it's great. And for the most part, thankfully, yeah, it's all been good for you, So I've been good on that.
Yeah, I think there was only like a few times where I'm like, yeah, it was whatever. You
Yeah,
know?
right.
But the hard part is for me trying to find something that's really good currently to recommend to you.
Yeah,
and you find exceptional.
I think the only one that you've recommended to me was Rook. That's the only one where I was like, okay, this is pretty good actually. I kind of dig this. I like where they're going with this, and so I might keep an eye on this one. But Ben says so many reasons. One, high turnover of creative teams. Bingo. That's another factor that we're going to explore in the show. Whether intentional by editorial or not, keeps the properties bigger than the creative teams. Bingo, Ben. I think you hit it right on the head there, because last week I was in the 656 stream, 656 comic stream. Shout out to Oli and Ray. And Ray mentioned to me that he listened to Rob Liefeld's podcast, which again, I highly recommend you listen. Listen to whenever you can. And he mentioned that Rob Liefeld spilled the beans of sorts regarding what Ben just wrote here in his comment. And that is that he said that in modern times, the reason why there's no more long runs like we had back in the day, long runs meaning, a writer and artist team writing a book or a title for over 20 titles. Let's just put it that way.
Or 20 issues.
Or 20 issues. Sorry, not 20 titles.
Yeah.
And
I
know, right?
20 titles.
And so he said the reason why they stopped doing that is because they don't want a repeat of what happened with the Image guys back in the 90s. And for quick context, I'm sure you guys know, but let's just repeat it for those who don't know, who may not know.
History time.
Yeah, so late 80s,
back
early
in the
90s.
Day.
you had what we were discussing now, superstar artists. That was Rob Liefeld, that was Todd McFarlane, it was Eric Larson, it was Jim Lee, Will Spatarcio, and I think Jim Valentino was another one, and also Mark Silvestri. And their body of work was just making Marvel so much money. It was just crazy how much money they were raking in because of their arts, the unique art styles that were presenting the old characters in a fresh light, in a fresh take. And so they became almost essentially bigger than the brand, right? Yeah. They were bigger than the X-Men. They were bigger than Spider-Man. They were bigger than the characters that the company were selling to the readers. Now at that point,
turn to gold.
Exactly. And so now readers were buying books not because of the characters, but because of the artists. And so when they went to Image, when they created Image, they left Marvel because of, again, you can look it up. It's retold over and over again. But when they left and created Image, they took a big chunk of that market share with them, meaning the readers who were once loyal to Marvel are now loyal to the artist. So when they left, they went with the artist and they stopped buying Marvel. I mean, I'm sure there are still a few Marvel heads who I'm still going to buy both because I still like the characters. I still like the books. But that's what Rob Liefeld mentioned, that they did that on purpose because they don't want superstars to outshine the brand, which is, in my opinion, a problem, because that's how you gain new readers. That's how you get readers to get excited about new stuff or new artists, and they get people who maybe dabbled in comics or don't read comics normally, and they could bring him in and say, dude, check this book out, you would love it. And then you can convert potentially a person who never read comics into reading comics.
Well, because it's allows the comic book distributors and publishers and stuff like that a way for word of mouth to spread and for
Yes.
people to have something familiar that they know, like they know this artist. And so having them be put on a title that say maybe they haven't worked on before, therefore you get the people who already like the artist.
Yes.
And then you get the people who want to show new people this artist on top of the fact that it's going to be a brand new character that might appeal to other audiences. So it should, in theory, make it more profitable for these big companies to have superstar artists, because that's what would draw in the not viewers, but the readers.
Right.
And go ahead.
No, I'm just saying Ben kept on listing. He said new creators branching off, trying to do their own thing rather than work for the big two, which is another factor as well, because when you work for the big two or even Image or even Dark Horse, you are pretty much become like a made man, like in the mafia. You become made. You've been anointed. You've been knighted, right? So once that happens to you, to the eyes of the reader, you've made it. You are now amongst Mount Olympus with the rest of the demigods that hang out up there. And so the fact that nowadays the people, the editorial staff that work for those companies, they're very picky as to who they want to, expose to the readership. Now at the same time, you have a lot of talented, very skilled comic book storytellers who are not getting the chance to really flex their muscles because they're not, to the eyes of the reader. Well, if you're not Marvel or DC, then I don't care about you. When when you do get anointed by Marvel or DC, now you've made it in the eyes of the reader, and now they're going to potentially back your indie book if you decide to go down the indie route or the Image route as well.
Because you're
there's that established. There you go. So he keeps on saying editors wanting no names to keep the pages rates low and stay within the budget. Dude, Ben, you're like hitting it. You're like hitting it out of the park, baby.
You should have just done the show.
Yeah,
man.
you should have
just say all the points.
Halloweener says Tom McFarlane was shown in the intros of the HBO Spawn cartoons. That's true. Rob Liefeld was famous for a Levi's commercial. That's right. That's right. Hey, but still, mainstream exposure. Still, like, that was a great way to funnel people who normally don't read comics to read comics. I mean, there's a famous story that Eazy-E. Do you know who Eazy-E is?
No,
Kyle. Eazy-E was a famous gangster rapper back in the 90s. NWA, Ruthless Records. He discovered a rap group called Bone Thugs and Harmony. Well, anyways, he was a very famous rapper at the time, and even he went to a Rob Liefeld signing to get his book signed by him.
Really?
So just goes to show how far Rob Liefeld's influence on the mainstream had when he was at his peak.
Well, that's why I think that, like, with Rob Liefeld specifically, I think he does. I mean, he had a good long line for him as well. And now with Deadpool, Wolverine, and stuff like that,
right.
He's, very popular now. And so I say he's probably up there, but I personally still don't consider him at the level that, like, Stan Lee was when he was
right.
his peak.
Yeah. I mean, right here, Halloweener also says that Stan Lee did talk shows. So there you go. He was showing his face around. Stan Lee was the face of comics. Let's just put it that way. He really
pretty
was.
much.
Yeah. Whenever he showed up anywhere, he was known as the comic book guy. Not to mistake him with the Simpsons character.
Yeah.
But
Thank you.
In the mainstream, Stan Lee was always known as the comic book guy. Just like going back to the wrestling analogy or example, Hulk Hogan was the wrestling guy, right?
Yeah. Or John Cena or The Rock or something like that.
Exactly. And Halloweener goes on to say if Sean Murphy was on TV or in movies, he'd be like Frank Miller, whose name exactly. And that's pretty much all. Go ahead.
Yeah, but see, like with Frank Miller, I mean, he makes cameos in his movies and stuff as well. And like, do everybody know that that's Frank Miller that's in there? I mean,
I know he was in Sin City, but they didn't, do the whole like, this is Frank Miller, people, the creator of this character. He just had a cameo as the priest who got killed in the confessional booth.
But I mean, like, even so, if you're looking at the comparison between, like, say, Frank Miller or Tom McFarlane, the one thing that Tom McFarlane does have going for him, and I would say that he probably edges out a lot more of these other creators in getting closer to that Stan Lee status, is like what you mentioned before, where with Stan Lee, he would actually go out and bring more attention to comic books and more,
Yes. Yes.
bring people in. Todd McFarlane is very outgoing, very wanting to be with the fans and stuff like that. Not saying that the others aren't, but in terms of his notoriety and his level that he is at right now, he
Yeah.
doesn't have to be, but he is.
Right.
And Frank Miller, he's great. He's done tremendous work throughout his life, and he's really nice, but he's a lot more reserved. I feel that, like, if Frank Miller was more extroverted and more to, like, that level of charismatic that Tom McFarlane was, I'd say he would probably be up to that Stan Lee status.
Well, yeah, but Frank Miller, he's not, his health
Yeah.
isn't the best these days.
Right. I know. I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that, like, in that sort of vein, that's how I view it.
Halloween here says the fact of the matter is that few creative teams can handle a monthly book, and that's another factor.
Yeah,
I think that's the main reason why a lot of indie creators. Don't get me wrong. There's little mini indie comic superstars, right, or up and coming superstars. But what I've observed in that indie comic sphere is that very thing that Halloweener here mentions, the deadline, right?
right.
The issue is late books. Again, guilty. I'm guilty of it myself, because there is no, when you work for the big two, or for that matter, any publisher, there's a deadline involved, right? There's the pressure of, like, okay, we hired you, we like your work, we want to work with you. Here's your first project, your first job. You have 3 weeks to get it done, or 4 weeks, or however long. I really don't know how it works, but now it's crunch time. Now you really gotta, like, get those pages out, because if you don't, and you're constantly late, you're not gonna work again. They're not gonna hire you again, and that's where the other pressure comes in. That's where the other superstar status comes to play. Is, can you remain consistent in outputting work? And if you can do that in the indie world, which there are certain people who do, and they do a great enough job, where now I seen their ascendancy to having a good living without even getting the exposure by the mainstream comic book websites that don't ever give spotlights to, comic book creators who are able to, gain their own fandom, to gain their own livelihood, and to gain their own, hey, this is our fifth book. That's monumental when you have an indie creator saying this is our fifth book. And on top of that, you see the rise of, like, how much they raise for either crowdfunding or even through their website, if they have a website. And it's kind of great to see. And that kind of stuff doesn't get spotlighted, because there is no magazine. There's no centralized place to really showcase, hey, this individual, he's coming out with his fifth book. Check it out. It's a story. The story is about this, right? And it's the fifth volume, or and then they kind of give a little brief story of what the story is about. And then that way they'll create the hype to have new readers, come and back your book. But honestly, at this point in our current landscape, word of mouth is king at this point. Word of mouth, and also reputation. And what I mean by reputation is, if you are, relatively communicative, or if you are communicative to your backers about being late, but you still fulfill and hopefully don't go beyond the year mark or 2 year mark, you could potentially keep your audience intact, and they'll keep supporting you until you get to the point where now you can churn out books faster, and with more quality, hopefully.
But I feel, as time goes on and newer generations come with, shorter attention spans and more, instant gratification, this longer period of time of waiting, even if you say, they're communicative and, very understanding in that aspect. The hard truth is people still want their comic books as soon as possible.
Yeah,
They want that
yeah.
story. And
Absolutely.
so I think that's what, to that point of like making a superstar artist or writer, something like that, is meeting those deadlines and making sure that you are hitting those deadlines.
Absolutely. And Ben here says current editors lack respect for the medium. For a long time, Ben, I didn't believe that, but now I believe it, because I see it firsthand when I pick up modern books, when I potentially, oh, this cover looks pretty cool, and I start looking through it, I'm like, oh, okay, maybe not, and I put it back.
Just watch the video we did last week of all the books that we reviewed.
Yeah, right.
That's
right. That's right. And don't care to have an eye for talent, and would rather hire a friend or potential love interest. That's unfortunately true. That's the major problem, is that they hire friends as opposed to the bottom line, which is which is pretty much talent and skill to get readers back and go, oh wow, the quality has gone back up, and now I'm going to keep reading it. You guys need to learn how to do weekly comics too.
We just talk about them.
Yeah, honestly, man, like if I could, I would, but unfortunately, for people like me who are writers only, I can't draw to save my life. Maybe if I take the time and effort and to learn and practice, I could probably do it, but I don't have the time. That's the problem. Right. I don't have the time to do it. But the only thing I can do is find artists who can draw the stories, and I would love to do weekly comics. I just, again, I can't afford to, because a lot of artists, rightfully so, charge a certain amount that I can't afford to pay on a weekly basis because of my budget. And that's the unfortunate thing, because you're on the money there, man. Like, I would love nothing more than to release weekly comics to showcase to everyone that I'm capable of writing good, compelling comic book stories. Unfortunately, I just don't have the budget for it to find artists who can help me fulfill that every week, if that makes sense.
Right.
Or else, I mean, hell, even I could learn and do it myself, but again, I need time. I don't have it. I don't have it to spare. So, or else I'll be all over that place, man. I mean, don't trust me. I would, I would for sure. But going back to what Ben said, I remember whenever I come across an idea or a concept, I always like to disassemble it and really analyze it. So when I hear the word gatekeeping, right now, that word has become almost it depends on who you are, right? Gatekeepers. Who needs them, right? And so it has a negative connotation to it. But when I really broke down what that concept meant, what does it mean to gatekeep, right? It's to make sure the barbarians don't come across the gate, right? You make sure that you sift
Conan the Barbarians.
Yeah. You sift the people who are entering your kingdom, and make sure that the people coming in are valuable. I mean, that's pretty much what gatekeeping really is. And so when I look back then, I don't know, because I can't be in everyone's mind, right? I'm not Professor Xavier. But I could see how gatekeeping can be important to the health of an industry. And what I mean by that is, let's just say, for instance, I was a gatekeeper, okay? And I already made my fortune doing what I love, comic books. Let's just say I made a few comic books. I found success. Now I have my livelihood. I'm doing it for a living. I'm happy. And here comes along an influx of people, wanting to be part of this thing of ours, right?
Yeah.
And I would imagine myself kind of paying attention to the people who are working to get there. And so I would imagine the gatekeepers of old who are already there and enjoying the success of the fruits of their labor. And let's just say they're at the comic book convention floor, and they're at the small press, area, and they notice, okay, there's a whole bunch of people here that are good, but some of these comic books are obscure and they're doing their own thing, but it's not really, I guess, quote unquote, commercialized or potentially commercial, which is important in itself, because if your books don't make money, then you can't keep making books. Just like in Hollywood, right? If your movies don't make money, you can't keep making movies, because
And you just
investors
send it to streaming.
yeah, because investors are going to be like, well, dude, I gave you X amount of money and you lost it, as opposed to, well, I gave you the money and you made two or three times more than what I gave you, so that's great. I'm going to keep giving you money because you're doing something right. And then they see, oh, you know what, this individual really works hard. They have their banner up, they have books laid up there, and on top of that, I noticed that they're very personable, and on top of that, even they're selling books. I see that their boxes are being depleted. Maybe not
numbers.
Yeah, maybe not. Like a what's that term called? Hotcakes. Like it's selling like hotcakes, right? Maybe not at that speed, but hey, I noticed on Friday you have a bunch of boxes full of your books back there, and then when they came back on Sunday, you have one box left or have a box left. So that tells me you hustled, you sold your product, and not only that, I bought your book and I read it, and you know what you're doing. I could tell you put in time and effort and invested your own money, you invested your own time to get to a level where people can access your book. And what I mean by access, I mean you have a, I guess, universal appeal, as the term is known, right? And now as the gatekeeper, you can say, hey, are you interested in an opportunity to really showcase your talents? And that's the importance of gatekeeping, in my opinion, as to what gatekeeping should ideally be. But now, as Mr. Ben Soto says here, it's not just hiring friends, talent or skill be damned. Right. And that really did hurt the industry as a whole, because it lost a lot of readers,
Well, and then it also fragmented the people that were already, on their way to become superstars, because they either left, the big companies, they were fired because of the big companies,
right.
And then they had to go and start their own, publishers if they wanted to keep in comics, or others that just dropped comics and didn't continue, And so I think that's another aspect of it, of while, you have these great artists and writers that want to be these superstars, like you said, sometimes it's just because of what the publishers are doing.
Yeah. And that's another factor too, right? I think that's safe to admit that not just the publishers, the editorials who work for those publishers, that because it's true, right? I mean, you can't deny it at this point. Editors always have an eye on up and coming talent. They always do. Mm-hmm. It was told to me at San Diego Comic-Con when I was in my networking, a little hurrah there. And an insider they'll tell me, not me directly, but the table I was sitting at, that editors from all companies always watch up and coming talent. Always. They do it by their own Twitter account, and they have burner accounts as well. This individual confirmed it. Of course, I can't prove it, but he said, just remember, guys.
Hearsay.
Yeah, just remember they're watching how you behave on social media. And if you behave a certain way, they're never going to hire you. It doesn't matter if you're the next Jack Kirby. It doesn't matter if you're the next Tom McFarlane. If they don't like you, they're not going to hire you. And that's unfortunate. That's really unfortunate if true. But again, this is coming from the insider. Of course, if we have him on the show, he'll probably deny it and say he never said it. But that's what he said at that networking event. And it kind of, at first I didn't want to believe it, but it was like, well, that makes sense. That does make sense, because it is a small industry.
I mean, but it's not completely exclusive to comic books. I mean, that's like true. You see that all the time with other, industries and other mediums and stuff like that, where, you could be, the next big thing, but because you said the wrong thing or did the wrong thing, whether it be intentional or not, it doesn't matter. You've been
Right.
branded whatever,
Right.
and that's what you are.
Halloweener here gave the context, and not what I meant. Go back to making weekly comic strips like they did in the 1930s, rather than try to make 22-page monthly comics. In your case, learn how to write weekly comic strips. Hey, good point.
Yeah.
You're right. That's right. That's right on the money there. You're right. That could be easily done too. I mean, social media is so easy just to post a 3-panel strip.
Yeah.
You know what? That's a good idea,
mean-
Halloweener. You know what? I think I'm gonna start doing that. Yeah, you're onto something there. You're right. I didn't even think of that. But he said that's another conversation for another time. Yeah.
I'll do
No,
a whole
I'm gonna take that into account. I really am, because again, to add to what you wrote here, if you're the next Jack Kirby or Tom McFarlane, then you don't need an editor to hire you, and you're absolutely right. Which is why I'm doing Ghetto Dragon, which is why I did Vigilant Fury, which is why I did Reset Protocol. I wasn't going to wait for
Right.
permission to do a comic book. I was going to just make the comic book, learn as I go, study the masters, and I'm still learning to this day. I'm still learning techniques. I'm still learning the proper way to tell a very compelling, enthralling comic book story. So that's another challenge to add to my list, is the weekly comic strip, because I've never done that. I honestly never have done that before. So now that'll be an interesting challenge. And if I could find an artist who can do that for me, easy, because 3-panel comic strips they shouldn't take that long to draw either, especially if it's a quick,
turnaround.
3-panel story. Yeah. So yeah, I'm down. Whoever's down out there listening to this, follow me on X at Lucid Comic, and let's see if we can do something. That'd be pretty good. That'd be pretty awesome, actually. I wouldn't mind doing that. Benjamin Soto says, good gatekeeping. Heard Chuck Dixon tell the story on Millard Time. An artist calls the Marvel office looking to come in and show his art to an editor. Larry Hama told him, "No, you're not good enough." Artist, "But you haven't seen my work." Larry Hama, "I don't need to. I can hear it in your voice." Ooh. Wow. Chuck said he said that to see if the artist would get mad and try to prove him wrong. Oh, interesting. Interesting.
Okay. So basically,
Don't leave me hanging, Ben. What happened? What happened in the end?
Maybe he's still typing.
Halloweener said it's like watching a weekly TV show rather than the monthly TV show, which is right on the money. Yeah, dude. Thank you for that, Halloweener. Actually, that never crossed my mind, to be honest with you. Doing the weekly comic strip, that would be so much easier to gain exposure for people who, may be uneasy to back one of my comic book projects in the future for a crowdfunding project that I may do down the line. And that probably could have also saved me a lot of time and heartache if I had started doing that and then do a crowdfunding where people go, "Oh, I like his weekly strips, so I'll check out his actual comic book work." So yeah, thank you for that. That's a great suggestion. He also says, and then you could crowdfund and print a book of the collected weekly strips along with extras. Order of the Stick did that and made millions. Well, there you have it. See, I've been doing it wrong this whole time.
You'd be a millionaire and you didn't even know.
I could have been a millionaire without even knowing it. Could have started my own publishing company by this point, have people work under me and all that. But no, I'm definitely going to do that, because that's a great idea. And then, hey, I could be my own superstar in the making by doing
right.
That. But that's the landscape today. I don't think the old superstar is not the same as the new superstar.
Right.
Nowadays you have, an example would be Eric July. Eric July is his own superstar in his own right, because he didn't make the 3 million of Isom because he was a known comic book writer. He did it because of his content creating that he did on his YouTube channel. And he got to the point where he reached a certain level where he had an X amount of subscribers and people who supported his work on his YouTube channel, so that when he offered his comic book, he was able to get that money because the people who love his content wanted to support him, and it worked out for him beautifully, actually.
But are comic book fans, like, when he announced that he was doing his comic book,
Yeah.
besides the fans that were already a fan of his, was there a lot of people, a lot of comic book fans wanting to buy his book when that
Yeah,
happened?
I think a lot of comic book fans bought his first issue of Isom because A, they were curious, and that's and B, comic book readers tend to always check out issue 1. I
Right.
do it. If I see an issue 1 and I go, "Oh, this is pretty cool. This looks interesting," I will pick it up. I will take the shot because that's just the way comic book readers are. We always like to try something new, especially if it's something that's outside the mainstream. And Eric July obviously is outside the mainstream. But then when you look at the numbers he did for Isom 2, still over 1 million, but it wasn't over 3 million, which meant
Right.
that he lost a lot of people. I would say he lost a lot of comic book readers after that first one, because after a while, we get accustomed to know the difference between quality and average storytelling to, okay, this is kind of his first time. It's not that great. It's not that compelling. I'm not going to check it out. I'm not going to check out the second one. And that's perfectly fine too. He still kept his fans intact by having them back the second book. But at some point, you either got to get better or not. And in my opinion, I don't think he's gotten better, in my opinion. But good on him for being able to sustain what he's been able to sustain over the last 2 or 3 years that he's been doing this, or he started doing this.
Well, and then you kind of mentioned though how comic book fans, they always gravitate towards number 1, and I think that's also kind of plays into a part of with Superstar. And I think Halloweener also mentioned something in the earlier about it, where when we talked about runs, long
Yes,
runs
right.
with things,
Yeah.
we don't see that anymore in comic book issues current, because they like to do these short mini series, so you don't really have the time or the length to actually show off these new
Yes.
creators
Yes.
and their skills. And some of these, I mean, you look at some of the superstars that we've looked at, some of them, their art was kind of, a little rough at the beginning, and then they found their stride, and
Right.
then,
Yeah.
then they really took off.
Absolutely.
If you're only doing that first, 6 or 7 issues, and that's all you're given, then you don't have the room to really find your own and get into a rhythm. And I think
Right.
that's also holding back a lot of these artists and these comic creators, writers and artists, where they can't get their stride in a run because there are no runs.
Right. And also, there's something charming also to see the progression of an artist's work as well.
Right.
When you see like the first issue of the run, or they're starting out, whatever, and you kind of see, okay, it's a little rough around the edges, but hey, it's passable. Like, I can still read it. It's still pretty good. And then it's great to see like the jump of quality when you pick up maybe not the next, slowly the next issue, and then maybe by the third or fourth, when they start finding their stride and you see it, you're like, whoa, dude, is this the same artist? And then you find out they're more comfortable. They've got more creative. They understand the characters and the world better. So now they're able to let loose and be creative and be bold, with their approach.
Especially if they are working alongside a really good writer, and that they both understand, each other, and both know exactly what they're doing. Like one of the, I keep going back to it. I watched an interview with Jim Zub, who's the current writer of Conan the Barbarian.
Yeah. Right.
And he says that he loves working with the 2 artists that he works with, because one of them absolutely knows everything about Conan. He doesn't need to explain anything with him. So when he works with that artist, he just writes the scripts knowing exactly that this artist is going to know everything.
Right.
And he's like, boom, done, ready to go. But then the other artist knows of Conan and knows of some of the storylines and stuff like that, but not a huge knowledge library and stuff like that, which then makes the writer think more about his scripts and maybe talk with the artist a little bit more. It's like, well, this is how it's supposed to be, and the significance of this, and this
Right.
is why it's important. And then that helps him write better because he's thinking, okay, well, if my artist can't understand what I'm thinking, how's the audience going to?
Exactly. Right. Right on the money.
So that way, you can get the best of both worlds.
Absolutely. So yeah, that's unfortunate because that just goes to show what Rob Liefeld said in the show, that the brand is more important than the superstar. They don't want to let artists and writers outshine the brand or the character that they're writing, because that's pretty much the star of the show, is the character they're writing.
Right. And
So that's go ahead.
I was gonna say, yeah, just to continue on with that, I think that's the reason why you see so many more of these bigger named artists and writers branching off and doing their own titles, because that's the only way that they could rise to that next level, because
Right.
they're not given those opportunities in the Marvel or DC camp. So they have to go into the indie scene, and whether or not, not every single indie book creator, they'll have their pull of fans that want to go and see what they're doing. I think one of the more notable examples was was mentioned, Sean Murphy. He established his Massive Publishing, I believe, and he was able to get some titles like I think he did Zorro, and then he did his own comic book, which was Plot Holes, which we reviewed, which was actually really good. And that was one of the reasons why I went to go and review those issues and read those issues, because I was a fan of what he did with Batman and the White Knight. So I think, you still need to be in Marvel and DC at least to get some of that notoriety. But as we mentioned throughout the show, there's a lot of things like with the deadlines and runs, making sure that you understand the medium that you're actually writing or drawing in.
Right. Yeah.
Word of mouth is also a huge thing to do. It has such an impact on things.
Yeah, and to go back to what McFarlane said in the video at the beginning of the show about bringing your own uniqueness to the table, right? Don't copy people. Do it the way you want to do it. Of course, there's an upside and downside to that. But I feel like these days most artists play it safe, and there's a few exceptions. Daniel Warren Johnson is the exception to the rule, because his stuff pops to me when I look at it. And another artist that I thought was really impressive was an image book called Bloodrick by Andrew Craig. Apologies if you ever watched the video. I'm sorry if I butchered that your last name.
That if you're new to the show, that's nothing new. We
just
terrible.
Don't take offense to it. Just please hit the like button and subscribe. That's all I ask for. And for those out there too,
and forgive us if we mispronounce, because we're terrible at that.
Yeah. And for those who are listening, please hit the like button and also subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. But his book really impressed me. I thought he was very bold in his approach to his story, and his artwork was superb. It was refreshing. It obviously was a Conan, very heavily influenced by Conan, but he brought his own take on it. And I was sad that we only got 3 issues. I was hoping for a nice little run of that book, because I was really impressed with his approach.
What we were talking about.
Thank you, Ben. Andrew Crank. I want to say Cranky, but I don't think that's the right man. Cranky. I don't know. Again, apologies. But yeah, Bloodrick. If you guys have not read Bloodrick, I highly recommend it. It's a fantastic looking book, and it's a great story as well. He lets the art tell you the story as opposed to just there's obviously narration and what have you, but the art really speaks for itself, which is fantastic. Halloweener says, I suspect it's more a matter of economics rather than preserving corporate brand integrity. They just can't afford big names doing long runs, or the big names just don't stay on for long runs. That could be also a factor too.
But that's the thing, though. It's like, do you want to say something?
No, I was going to say that another factor that played into creating the superstar is sales.
Yeah.
You know, sales always play a big factor in creating the superstar. You know, Rob Liefeld was famous, also Alan Moore as well, but Rob Liefeld was famous for going on to Marvel. They offered him all these books, and he said, "No, give me X-Force, or give me something that I could, you know, make into an A-list, right?" And they gave him X-Force, and he made it A-list. That's a sign of a superstar, in my opinion, because he was able to take something that didn't really sell well. It was you know, popular in its own right, but not like massively popular like X-Men or Spider-Man, and he made it massively popular. And that to me is a sign of a superstar, someone who just goes, "Give it to me, and I'm gonna just take it and take it all the way to the top."
Right.
And Alan Moore, the same thing. When Len Wein and Bernie Wrightson were doing Swamp Thing, it was a pretty successful book in its own right, a horror comic. It had its following. I believe the sales from what I read was about 50 to 60,000 units that they were making, maybe a little bit more. I could be off. You know, if anyone out there knows, you know, please correct me. But when Alan Moore took it over and he, you know, took it to the direction that he did, the book went from 50 to 60,000 to over 2 to 300,000 within a span of like 6 months. And again, that to me is a sign of a superstar, someone who's able to take on a book or a project. It could be indie, or it could be something that's established by the big two, or another book that's established by another publisher, and make it a massive success. In my eyes, you're a superstar. You made it. You crossed the threshold by producing such high quality work that it lured people who normally would not have bought that book. You know, Swamp Thing,
Right.
something that I never would have read as a kid, never. But as I got older and I started, you know, I got exposed to Alan Moore's work, and I started reading Swamp Thing, I was like, dude, this is phenomenal. Like, this is just another level of like, wow.
When you're thinking of superheroes, Swamp Thing is not the first thing that comes to mind.
Right. But Alan Moore took it to that level, took that character to that level, and made it, you know, phenomenal. Hey, Justin, what's up?
Hey.
Halloweener says Liefeld has a lot to say about Alan Moore. Among other things, he's super. Yeah, that's what I heard.
Yeah.
Alan Moore was extremely expensive, and was like, wow, okay, all right, I guess I'll pay that. and again, that's the downside to superstar, right? It goes to your head, and you don't lower your rate, you know, for anyone at that point. So, I mean, I don't know. It's just one of those things where.
But even still, like, you know, we're still talking about these comic book creators that were all very popular in the 90s, and you know, and you know, we're still 25 years later.
Yeah.
And I mean, the only people that we're really still talking about are Liefeld and, you know.
Well, I
and
mean, let's
McFarlane
also be fair. Robert Kirkman belongs
Yes.
at that camp too. I mean, Walking Dead was not an established property. Invincible was not an established property. Those were new books that people, you know, were kind of, okay, cool, a zombie book. Oh, okay, cool, another superhero comic. But Robert Kirkman mastered the art of the slow burn.
Yeah.
Right. And the slow buildup, that when he hit that first mark in Invincible, that pretty much turned the property into a massive success. The same thing with Walking Dead. That's another guy who I think is totally a superstar, because he took an original IP that he created himself and made it into a huge I mean, now Walking Dead is like a pop culture phenomenon now, and so is Invincible to some extent. So that's another one.
But he was still also from the 90s still, though. I mean, like when
no, he wasn't from the 90s. He was from the 2000s.
Oh, okay, early 2000s.
Yeah, early 2000s. But still, lightning in the bottle. I mean, you can't take that away from him, because no one's done that since then. You know, that Robert Kirkman, his success of Invincible and Walking Dead reminds me a lot of how Peter Laird and Kevin Eastman had with Ninja Turtles.
Right.
They came out with this book.
Everybody wants to be turtles.
And everyone, and it blew up, right? It was an indie book, a black and white indie book that had a nice little print run, and it just blew up. It went crazy. You know, it was amazing.
The right thing at the right time.
Yeah, exactly. And the same thing can be said for Robert Kirkman for Walking Dead and Invincible. And it's funny because the Invincible story is they were going to cancel it,
Right.
and of course he told Jim Valentino, who was the editor or the editor in chief or the publisher of Image at the time, and told him, dude, we're going to cancel the book. It's not making any money. It's not selling enough for us to keep it. And of course, Robert Kirkman was like, well, I got this twist that I'm working on. He said, well, you got to do it now because there's going to be no book for it. So he sped it up and it paid off, and now it's the famous, think. Yeah. It's hard to have your heart invested in working on something that you don't own. Absolutely. And
well, I mean, but
right?
even so, like going back to Kirkman, I mean, like
Mhm.
he's doing the Transformers and GI
Right.
Joe
Yeah.
and all that
Yeah.
stuff, and even though they're licensed properties, I think though that some of the reason why they want it, I mean, we go talk about Daniel Warren Johnson with Transformers. That's
Right.
one of the reasons why that's doing so well. I
Oh,
think
absolutely. Yeah.
out of all the books that are coming out, modern books that are coming out, I think those are the ones that are like selling pretty consistently.
Yes. Yes, I agree. Halloween also here says Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples have done very well with Saga. Yes, Saga is another one. Saga is another one that just blew up.
I've always heard about it, but I never actually gotten to actually read it or really understand it.
Apparently, it's
like
phenomenal. I never read it either, but from what I've been told by my friends and colleagues who have read it, it's like a phenomenal piece of work. And I don't doubt it because Brian K. Vaughan is pretty great as a writer. Like he's a great comic book writer.
Do you know what the story is on it, or?
Yeah, it's a sci-fi opera story
Oh.
where that involves a bunch of aliens, and I mean I don't know the details of it, but all my friends swear by it, and I've been meaning to. It's on my list of read, to read, but I just haven't had the time to actually sit down and read the trades because the single issues are hard to find. They're hard to come by.
Yeah.
So if you find issue 1, congratulations, because issue 1 is hard to find right now. But to add what Halloweener says here, but they don't want to turn it into a TV show or movie. Brilliant. I love that because sometimes comic book stories should remain comic book stories.
Right.
There's just certain stories that belong to a medium and should stay in their respective medium. You don't make a Godfather comic book. Right? You know what I mean?
I mean, given the chance, I'm sure they.
I'm sure you can make one, but should you make one is the question.
Right.
2001: Space Odyssey was adapted into a comic book that Jack Kirby drew, but can you compare that to the film? No, you can't. Even though the King drew it, there's no way. Benjamin Solo regarding to Saga says I tried to read it but couldn't get into it. Hey, to each their own. That's what I say.
Yeah.
So not everyone liked it, but again, I haven't read it, so I can't say whether or not it's any good. But Saga was a huge success. I know that for a fact. But I think, I think that's pretty much it, man. Like superstar, you can still be a superstar in today's day and age. It's just going to be a lot harder to do because there's got to be some kind of alchemical mix between an artist that may have a great story or a writer who has a great idea that finds the right artist for it, and it just fits and it blows up, which is very possible, which can happen. It will happen.
They can be great in their own rights, though. Somebody could be a great writer just because they're great, like Alan Moore. Now, I don't know whether or not Alan Moore is to the level of like if you mention his name to anybody that's like, not passerby, but like type of person, would they understand would they know who Alan Moore is?
Probably not. No.
Right.
No.
But
maybe if you mention some of their works, like maybe if you say, "Oh, have you ever seen the movie From Hell?" and they say, "Oh yeah, he wrote that comic."
Or Watchmen.
Like, oh, cool. Or Watchmen. Yeah, Watchmen's another one. That's the most famous one. Bendis Malieve, Daredevil comes pretty close to a Godfather comic book, but better. Oh, that's a bold statement, Halloweener. And by the way, for the record, Halloweener, you're right. That run that Bendis and Malieve did for Daredevil was superb. Like that's one of my favorite. I always reread that storyline when the Kingpin gets attempted assassinated, when he gets stabbed like Caesar. That whole storyline was fantastic, man. I mean,
spoilers.
Yeah, spoilers, whatever. It's been years. You should know at this point. And if you haven't read that, guys, if you never heard of that storyline, find it, Read it. You won't regret it. It's fantastic. It's one of the best Daredevil storylines. I think it's up there with the Frank Miller run, in my opinion. I know that's a bold statement in and of itself, but Bendis and Maleev were just on point with that book. So I highly recommend you guys check that run. I want to share this last tweet that Halloweener shared in my little thread here of the post of the show. It's a long one, but bear with me because I think he has a pretty good another good observation here regarding superstars and how the landscape has changed with that. So he says here,
oh wow.
Yeah, I know. I know. Maybe
you know what, Halloweener.
You know what, Halloweener. Maybe next time when this happens, I'll probably just have you on, and you could just hop on and converse with us.
Very passionate about this.
You can share. No, I mean that's great. That's what we like. That's why. That's the kind of audience we want to cultivate here in the show. We want to cultivate an audience of people who can share their ideas and have a back and forth. You know, that's what it's all about. And so don't mock me, fool. What's the matter with you? He says here, a major turning point for me is when I had a chat with Marko Jurdovic. Again, apologies for mispronouncing that. During a concept art workshop. Oh, okay. He was a huge rising star among a circle of some of the best video game artists in the world called Massive Black, who hosted a high-dollar workshop. At that time, he was doing several covers for Marvel after being recruited by Joe Quesada for having redesigned the X-Men for fun over a period of 24 hours. I think that I didn't think that highly of him, which is probably why he was so open to casually chat with me. But he was doing a bunch of painted Daredevil covers, and I was really into the Bendis Maleev Daredevil. Hey, there you go. Shout out. Yeah. Still my favorite run to this day. Same here. So I asked him what he thought of Alex Maleev and Travis Charest and all the other comic book superstars I idolized. His response was staggering. He said that he makes art for one reason, because he enjoys it, and he doesn't give a fuck, excuse my language, about those guys or about what anyone thinks. He went on to say that you've got to kill your heroes, because once you do, there will be an empty throne, a void, which you will fill with yourself. He jabbed his finger into my chest, tapping over my heart as he said it. I jabbed him back, saying that the next time we meet, I'll be a badass. So for a moment, and by the way, that's true, because that cover you did for Ghetto Dragon, superb. For a moment, he looked like he was ready to fist fight me, but that quickly passed, and instead he pleaded, "Don't say that." It took me a while to fully comprehend what he was trying to tell me, and I realized he was right on all counts. So considering the notion of superstardom from that angle, it's basically hero worship, which is, that's true to a certain extent, for sure, which is something that children do to model behavior as they develop. And as long as you elevate some other man above yourself, then you're never going to come into your own, as there will always be a sense of comparison that will psych you out because, hey, who do you think you are? You're not Frank Miller. And on the flip side, it alienates you if you're the object of such worship. It's nice to hear praise, but when people are falling over themselves to shower you with it until they begin to resent you for being so good and want to tear you down after putting you up so high on a pedestal, it becomes very destructive, which is another good point. At the very least, you're burdened with all kinds of unreasonable expectations. And while it might be a highly effective marketing strategy, Arrow July comes to mind, when people are buying into a cult of personality, into a myth rather than your work, then it's toxic to your work and likely to your mental health. So in a nutshell, superstardom, celebrity is not something to be desired, certainly not the goal of being a creative. If anything, it's a burden that comes with great success. That's why it's best, I think, to stay behind the curtain and direct such excessive adulation away from yourself and toward the work.
Wow. Yeah. I can't really clap, but...
Yeah, bravo. Bravo. Bravo, mi amigo. Bravo. Well said, dude. Well said. You're absolutely right. I guess since we're here live, for context, it wasn't really about idol worship, but now that you mentioned that, yeah, for sure, that was definitely a factor there. A lot of people, you mentioned Alan Moore earlier,
yeah,
right, and how expensive he was, and maybe all that fame, even though he likes to admit that he didn't like it, it probably still went to his head, considering how much he charged Rob Liefeld to write, for Supreme, the character Supreme, which was I think Extreme Studios version of Superman that Rob Liefeld created. And he tapped Alan Moore to write a run for Supreme, and he pretty much charged Rob Liefeld an arm and a leg to write the whole. Yeah. That's, according to Rob Liefeld, that's what happened. He pretty much says, "Here's my page rate, and if you don't want it, then I'm not going to work." And so Rob Liefeld paid it.
Wow.
But again, it goes to
the money at that time.
What was that?
Yeah, I had the money at that time.
Oh, he and some at that time for sure. But
even like sticking with Alan.
Well, go ahead.
Yeah, it was just a little side note sticking with Alan Moore. I mean, like when you mentioned how, some people just don't want that type of fame and stuff like that, where people are falling over themselves trying to get to you. That was one of the famous, like what you told me about, reason why Alan Moore doesn't go to like conventions or anything like that, because he doesn't want all that to, because he wanted to go out and actually like see the comic books and walk around and stuff like that without being hounded. And I think there are times where it's like, some of these superstar artists, they don't have a time to themselves. They're just instantly on the go. And I mean, Todd McFarlane, as much as he is, as great as he is and trying to like meet with fans and stuff like that, his whole time at the convention was just, okay, got to go to this section to go sign comic books, got to go to this section to go sign comics, got to go to this section, meet these people, go talk to these people. So like, I'm sure at the end of the whole convention, he's just like dead tired, can't do anything, doesn't want to see another comic book for a while.
Seriously.
And then he's got on top of that, his whole toy company and stuff like that. He's got to go to that panel to go and talk about that. So it's like, you get to that type of level. I mean, like with Stan Lee, I'm from all the stories that I've heard, that's the only thing he was doing was sitting at that table signing books, and that was the only thing he ever did.
I remember I saw Stan Lee in person years ago. I can't remember if it was San Diego, I can't remember if it was WonderCon, but he was the only, I guess, comic book legend that was not hounded by fans when he was walking around, which I thought was great. I thought that was a nice gesture by the fans who did see him. And I was at a vendor spot. I was looking through their back bins, and Stan Lee walked by like literally 4 feet away from me, in front of me, and he said hello to the vendors, called them by first name. How's the family? How's the kids? How's business? All great, and of course everyone around, people saw him. Oh, hey Stan, like, hey Stan, yeah. And so everyone was like, hey Stan, and I was expecting people to like rush him. And like try to talk to him or try to get him to sign things, but no one did. Everyone respected his space and they left him alone. And he had a small talk with the vendor, and then he's okay, well, gotta go, gotta make my rounds. And then he left. I mean, he wasn't by himself. He had his hounders around him to make sure that, I guess, that he wasn't bothered.
that crowd doesn't happen.
But no one attempted to approach him, which I thought was pretty cool. The fact that they let him breathe and let him walk around to make his rounds. And that I respect him a lot more after that, because I was like, oh, that's great that he's actually going to the vendors and reminding everyone that, hey, don't forget to buy those comics, true believers, and that's what keeps also the industry going, is that people like you and I who go to the shops and buy comics from the shop owners, because the comic book industry, the model itself, it's the last, I guess, uncentralized like industry. There's no book chain. There's no chain store, national chain store that sells comics. There's regional.
Besides like Barnes and Noble, if you want.
Yeah, but Barnes and Noble doesn't carry monthly books. They don't carry monthly floppies like every month. They don't even do that. They only carry the graphic novels or the trade paperbacks. But the fact that you have vendors who are store owners themselves, and that's what keeps the industry going. But that's one example of I guess a superstar being able reaching a level where people are like, okay, just let him be, like it's all good,
Well,
but go ahead.
On that type of point, it's more of like, well, in that instance, he's being a little bit more a little bit more humble in the fact of like, yeah, he's vendors and these comic shop owners are the whole reason why
Yeah.
this industry
Yeah.
exists. And I
Mhm.
think that's all.
Absolutely.
I mean, I think Tom McFarlane does have some of that as well. He does seem to be like that type of person that
And
wants.
Rob Liefeld too.
Yeah.
He still does signings at bookshops,
Oh
which
yeah.
is great.
Yeah. He still does that.
And that always brings business to that shop, because now you're bringing people in, and now they could browse your store and, oh, look at this, and then they start picking stuff up, and then they start buying stuff from your store because they're there for Rob Liefeld, or they're there for Kevin Eastman. When Kevin Eastman showed up to our local comic shop, I went there thinking, yeah, the line won't be that bad. I'll probably buy a book and then get him to sign it. And then when I got there, I was like, dude, there's a fucking line around the block. Like, no, I can't freaking, I'm not gonna wait in that line. But but see, I underestimated his star power amongst the comic book fans. That was my mistake. That was my own hubris.
Yeah.
I should have known better. In other
The
words,
creator of the Ninja Turtles.
yeah,
Yeah, it's
it
like,
was
oh
gonna
yeah,
be,
he's not gonna be that busy.
I'll go on my lunch break and wait there for 20 minutes and get my signature. No, it wasn't gonna be 20 minutes. So, but it was great to see the shop busy. That was the great thing about it when I showed up there. When I showed up there, like, yeah, I'll pick up the last Ronin, have him sign it, whatever. But nah, dude. I was like, no, I'm not gonna wait that line. And I regret to this day I didn't buy the last Ronin when it came out, and I should have. So shame on me on that. But again, it was great to see the store packed with people looking, browsing through the store and picking stuff up. That was fantastic. But yeah, it was so yeah, I guess to end it, because I think that's all we covered up. We covered pretty much everything, and I did a Halloweener. If you're still there, that last tweet was right on the money.
Great.
You're absolutely right. Great point. You're absolutely right. It is a form of hero worship, idol worship, whatever you want to call it, and that does blind you a bit as a fan. The first time I ever approached my favorite artist as just a person and not like fanboying out was Tim Sale, and the moment I did that, it was a lot easier to have a conversation with him, as opposed to, oh, wow, you're amazing. It was more like,
sign this.
It was more like, yeah, I really dug this cover. How would you do this cover? And then he opened up, oh wow, yeah, this is an old cover. I can't believe you have this. You're the first one to bring this to me. It was a cover for El Diablo, that was published by Vertigo Comics. It was a 4-issue miniseries that was written by Brian Azzarello and drawn by Daniel Zeljiba. Again, apologies for
that's some name.
brutalizing your last name, but it's a great horror Western story. And Tim Sale drew the covers of that miniseries, and he I handed him the book, and he saw it, and he was like, wow, I can't believe you have this cover. You're the first one to bring this to me. And then I asked him, how'd you do it? And then he just started explaining to me how he did it. And it was great to have a back and forth with Tim Sale and not feel awkward, not feel weird, or like make it weird for him by fanboying out. It was more like, oh, there was a genuineness of my appreciation of his work, because Tim Sale was a superstar in his own right as well. And the fact that there was no one in his table during the time when I approached it, I don't know if it was dumb luck, or I don't know if I got him right as he came back from a lunch break or something, and people didn't know he was back yet. I was happy that I was able to get that free time with him and be able to talk with him and have a back and forth.
Because he had already done like Long Halloween and
all that stuff,
right?
Yeah, he was already riding high after the success of Long Halloween, and they were. And I asked him, oh, so are you gonna do any more stuff with Jeff Loeb? He's, oh yeah, we're working on other stuff. Keep your eye out for that one. We'll make an announcement soon enough, and all that. Halloweener says, I was at a small indie con with Eastman. I was hanging at a table sketching with friends, and Kevin swung by and gave me a cheer on his way out. That was cool. Hey, that is cool, man. Heck yeah. You always want like the motivation, right? From people that you respect as artists or as comic book creators. That's cool. That's a cool story. Well, Kyle,
So
I think
I
that
guess in summary and stuff that we talked about, you know, to be a superstar, there's just a lot of stuff
yeah,
that's
yeah, a lot
happening.
of stuff, a lot of
I
stuff.
mean, just like in terms of, okay, if you want to look at it from an individual standpoint, in order to be a superstar, you gotta, hit the numbers. You got to make sure things are on time, word of mouth, making sure that
Yes,
your quality is up to par. You're finding yourself in your own image and not just copying somebody else. And in terms of the broader aspect of things, long runs
right.
and editors and stuff like that have all changed from when it happened in the 90s, and so it's a completely different landscape now than what it was. And so it's hard. I would say that's probably one of the reasons why there isn't a whole lot of superstars, but it doesn't mean that it's not impossible.
Right.
you know
Right.
that you can still be a superstar in today's modern comic book sphere, but it takes a lot of effort on everybody's side, basically.
Yeah, yeah, and then when you have the lack of the centralized, magazine or comics journalists, magazines or whatever, who purposely refuse to cover certain artists and writers because of political affiliations, ideological, philosophies, or just because they just don't professional jealousy even. You don't have the kind of exposure you had back in before the internet. Now, as my brother-in-law once told me, there's no excuse now. We have all the tools available. I have all the tools available to me in terms of finding some kind of success in my work, in my own personal work. Ghetto Dragon, Vigilant Fury, Reset Protocol, which, by the way, you can still back Vigilant Fury, still on demand on Indiegogo. Those books will be fulfilled soon, as they are at the printers. But at this point now, it's just, for me anyway, I can only speak for myself. Now it's just a matter of what should be my marketing strategy? What's my promotional strategy? I don't want to involve myself in drama farming because that's taxing. It's too hard. I mean, I could do it if I wanted to, but I guess I'm at that age where I'm like, I don't want to do that. I want to, and I prefer doing this. What you and I are doing, what the chat and what we're doing is having discussion, looking at certain topics and discussing it, and having, I guess, intellectual conversations regarding the topics that we cover, and looking at things.
We're such big intellectuals.
Yeah, I mean, you know what I mean. You know what I mean.
Yeah.
And looking at things objectively as possible, and of course, still keeping our own opinions and sharing those as well, and going back and forth and agreeing and disagreeing. I mean, that's the kind of environment I want to create here in this channel. And to remind everyone again, once the books are fulfilled, that includes Reset Protocol, that includes Vigilant Fury, and pretty soon Ghetto Dragon, I am going to open up the show, and I'm going to allow you, those who back the book, to come on the show live and give me your live review to my face and show everyone how much of a thick skin I have. And I want to prove that. I really do. I want to put that to the test, because a lot of artists are thin-skinned, and I get that, because we're expressing ourselves. We're putting our hearts into our work. So when anyone dares to critique our expression,
oh, man.
You don't know anything. You're stupid. Get out of here. I want to go against that grain, because I understand where I'm at. I understand the industry I'm part of, and that is, it's commercial work. It'd be one thing if I was producing an autobiography of myself and my life. That's one thing, right?
Yeah.
But if I'm doing fictional work, then my work is open to critique. That's the whole point. That's the whole point of it. Everyone might pull a bandit on you, Kingpin stepping on you. As long, but see, here's the difference, Halloweener. I'm not blind like Kingpin was at that story. Yeah. My eyes are wide open, so I'm ready. I'm ready for those knives, man. I got the Kevlar suit on, like Bane from Dark Knight Rises, like this.
Yeah, all ready. And
No one cared
And
who
you-
I was until after the mask.
But then
But yeah,
you have to, make sure that your points are,
yes,
valid.
ground rules. I'm gonna keep. Every week I'm gonna remind you guys. So just remember that if you say what I wrote or produced sucked, you have to elaborate what sucks means. Okay, you gotta
Right.
you gotta tell me why it sucks.
It is bad.
Yeah. Okay. Why is it bad? What made it bad?
Because it is bad.
At that point, I'm just gonna kick you out of the show because I actually want to hear constructive criticism. That's what I actually
Because
want to hear. So
it is bad.
you're out of here. You're out of
All
here.
right. Yes.
But yeah. So
Well,
that's
you
gonna be.
suck.
Thank you, Halloweener. I'm glad you were a part of the show. See what you're doing, Kyle. See what you're doing. You're just spreading it. You're just spreading it.
Yeah.
But that's essentially what I'm gonna do. Because I want to get better. I want to see what my weak points are. I want to see what my strong points are, and I want to just get better with every new project that I produce and I finance. So keep an eye out for that. I will market and promote it when it's ready to go. So once you get your books, please read them. Read it. Write down notes if you want. You paid for them. Exactly. And let me know what you really think. And don't be afraid to share your thoughts about it because again, I like to champion myself as someone who's thick-skinned at this point. 20 years ago, I may have not done this because I was thin-skinned. I didn't really like yeah, exactly.
No,
But
bad.
as I got older and I got wised up by a few people who I met in my journey here as a comic book writer, one individual, one editor I worked with pretty much put me in my place and told me, dude, you're in the business of showcasing work. I mean, that's just a given. You're always gonna have haters. You can't win them all. So just write what you think is best and just put it out there and take what he called feel the burn. Feel the burn, right? Feel it. Don't avoid it, because if you avoid it, you're never going to grow. You're never going to get better as a writer. So he said, just feel the burn, let it sit, and then really objectively look at the critique, the fair critique that this individual gave you because he paid you for that book. So once that clicked, man, it was like, all right, cool, I'm ready for it. We got a bright future. Thank you, Halloweener, and so do you, man. I hope you're still drawing, dude, because I really did love that cover. I hope you know that, and I'm not just saying that. I really do mean it. I really love that cover. When I showed Kyle the cover, he dug it, but I really thought you captured the essence of Ghetto Dragon when you drew that cover of him protecting his family in the alleyway. It was right on the money. So I hope you're still drawing.
It is not bad.
You bastard. Well, again, thank you for showing up or for joining us and having this discussion with us. I agree with Kyle. Superstars are always going to come. Daniel Warren Johnson is the most recent one, I think. And he has a bright future ahead of him. His style is very unique and pops whenever I see it. So anything that he does going forward, I'm going to pick up no matter what. So there's going to be more that are going to come. Andrew Cranky, again, I apologize if I mispronounced that, but Blood Rick, another book has a lot of potential. And he did on Twitter, he did respond to someone's tweet who asked him if he was going to do any more. He said he was working on more, so there's going to be more Blood Rick, which I'm excited about, and I'm definitely going to pick up. And he has a bright future ahead of him too. I hope he does make it to the top because his work is superb. But yeah, there are still superstars of today. It's just now it's fragmented, as Halloweener has said in his various X posts, that it's fragmented. It's not really centralized anymore. So now there's pockets of superstars amongst their own
Right.
tribe, as opposed to a centralized what used to be back then in the 90s and early 2000s before the internet became a powerhouse that it is today. So at the end of the day, it all boils down to word of mouth. So Kyle knows of Alex Ross and all Rob Liefeld and the Image guys because of me. I handed it down to him, and now he's aware of all
Well,
that.
not Alex Ross. I figured that by myself.
No. I introduced you to Alex Ross, Kyle.
No, I found Kingdom Come, and I knew Alex Ross from that.
Oh, right. You're right. My mistake. You're right. You're right about that. You're right.
Yeah.
But the other stuff, Frank Miller.
Yeah.
I mean, Andy.
Alan
Adam
Moore.
Kubert,
Alan Moore was a big one.
Alan Moore. I introduced you to Alan Moore. Now it's just word of mouth, and he and I exchange. So he always recommends new stuff to me. I recommend the old stuff to him, and it's been working out so far. And some of the new stuff, like for instance, Rook from Ghost Machine, has been impressive. I actually am digging that story particularly, but the other ones, not so much.
Yeah.
So I mean, yeah.
talked
I mean,
about
who
on the
knows?
show.
Who knows? Maybe in a year or two, I'll be a superstar, quote unquote.
Hey,
But
never know.
as Halloweener did say, that's not the goal. The goal is to just write good stories, to work really hard to provide you guys quality comic book stories that I want to
Right.
keep doing until I can't anymore. So keep an eye out for all the books that I'm going to put out. I am going to put out Ghetto Dragon soon, a new edition of it, because I do have big plans for that particular title, and I'll keep you guys updated on that. But for now, pick up Vigilant Fury if you haven't already.
Yeah.
Reset Protocol
Ben
will
has been
fulfill soon.
Ben
Thank you
putting in the
for that,
chat.
Ben. I appreciate that. Reset Protocol is should be almost ready. I should get that any day now. So keep your eye out for that once I start fulfilling it. And that's about it. Kyle, do you have any other last words before we call it a night?
The only thing that I always say, is to my catchphrase: build those experiences.
Build those experiences. Yeah, there you go.
Yes.
And that is key. That is key. That's what helps you grow. That's what will help you gain a readership, hopefully down the line, if you just keep building those experiences.
Build those experiences, make those connections, build with artists, build with writers, build
Yes.
with other communities, build with your comic shop, owners
Yeah,
and
right.
other people. The more people that you get accustomed and in your sphere, the more you'll be influenced by other people, by what their likes are, what dislikes are, and the more everybody will just grow together. And so definitely build those experiences with other people, and I think you'll always be the better for it.
Well said. Bravo. Well said.
Yeah.
So we've come to the end of the show. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, leave a comment after the fact if you watch the replay, and join us in the next one. We change topics every week. We never know what the topics are until the next week. So, but that's what keeps the show fresh. I think that's what keeps it interesting.
A lot of the times it's just basically when I observe something that happens. And
but that's
because we work together.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I thought about this the other day.
Yeah.
And then, but we talk about it.
It's great because then we cultivate it during the week. We exchange ideas and thoughts, and we write them down sometimes. And then when we come to on Friday, we're already not rehearsed, but we have a good idea of what we want to talk about and keep it in topic and not chase rabbits, as the saying goes.
But the best part of it is when we get to interact with you and
yes.
get to see your reactions to what's happening. So again, as we've gone throughout, this whole show, we love reading your comments and chatting with you. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
So if you're ever hesitant to actually say something in the chat, don't be. We love talking with you, no matter what your opinion is. We want to hear it.
Absolutely. Once again, well said. Bravo. Kyle.
Yeah, see, sometimes I can do well.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm not bad.
Yeah. All right. With that said, whenever I end the show, during the week I always like to find interesting things that make me laugh, things that are thought provoking, things that may have fit the theme of the show, or things that are just out there. But this week I wanted to stay in theme of the show, and I found this clip from an interview that was done with Christopher Plummer. Now, for those of you who don't know, Christopher Plummer is a famous actor. He's passed away, but his last movie I think was House of Knives, I believe it was, the Rian Johnson movie. But very famous actor. He was in Sound of Music. He was in Dragnet. He was in various multiple movies. But he's talking about stars, superstardom. And I thought it was a great fit to the show. So I want to share with you because I think what he says is also adds to how a certain, I guess, personality, what kind of a certain kind of personality is needed to be a quote unquote star. And I thought his answer was pretty good here. And I know he's talking about acting, but I think that what he says applies to every industry that has their own, superstars in their own right. And as we saw in that first clip with Todd McFarlane, his answer to Stan Lee's question was a sign of that. He was like, I'm going to do it my way. And he did it his way. And it worked out for him because now he's remembered fondly as not just one of the best or greatest Spider-Man artists of all time. He's now become a powerhouse because of his McFarlane toy line and also because of Spawn. Spawn is earlier today, my brother told me that he knows of Todd McFarlane because of Spawn.
You didn't know anybody else. We went through this whole thing of like, you know this person, you know that person.
Right.
He's like, I know Todd McFarlane because of Spawn. But he doesn't know any other comic books or anything else like that.
And that's because he liked the way Spawn was drawn. He thought it was the best thing he'd ever seen. And he never read comic books at all. He never bought them. He never collected them. He just one day, he said, I believe it was his friend showed it to him and he was like blown away. He was like, oh my God, what is this? This is amazing. But it wasn't enough for him to buy comics. It was just, all it did was just, he appreciated the art. That's what it was. And that speaks volumes for someone in Todd McFarlane's skill level. That fact that he was able to get somebody who doesn't read comics to enjoy and like something that he created, and which is what we all want, right? We all want to convert people to like our stuff. So here's Christopher Plummer. Have a great weekend, guys. Stay safe out there. We'll see you in the next one. You take it easy and remember, build those experiences.
Yes. Build those experiences. Bye, guys.
Peace. Make some people stars. Others just aren't, right? They're wonderful, they have great talent, but they're not a star. And I don't mean in terms of, the publicity industry trying to make stardom to
no,
make
you're
more
talking
sales.
about real stars.
Real stars.
Yeah, star actors or star singers or so. Yeah, I don't think you can explain it. I think one is born with a certain desire to command. It sounds like Napoleon, but there has to be a little bit of Napoleon in you to have the sort of confidence to come on and be able to command an audience. Now, if you have that already in you, and sometimes it's because of shyness that we talked about that made you and forced you to have it, if you're lucky enough to have it, then you start to learn how to execute it. And that's technique. And then watching Olivier on stage later on in his life, as Othello, for example, you could see it work there, where he knew how to make the proper pause. He knew how to come on a few minutes late. Which I learned right away, to never come on if somebody says, ladies and gentlemen, but Christopher Plummer, you don't come running on. You wait till the audience says, maybe you didn't make it. Oh, there he is! That's the old trick. Just come on a little bit late, and then do things like knowing exactly when the great moment is, like in a musical score, when that when the climax is and when the coda is. You have to think musically so that you know if some actor is bellowing, you know exactly how to underplay and undercut him. And save the great moments for their simplicity and just say the famous line like it's never been said before, or try to be as different as you can.
Right.
But all those things help.
But there's also
Stardom.
presence. There's
Yeah,
also
well,
just sheer presence.
Yes, I know. The presence is comes from that desire to command and to control and to be ahead. You have to be ahead. Don't let the audience be ahead of you or know what you're going to do. You've got to surprise them. That's the thing. Always surprise. Just try to keep ahead of them by surprising them all the time.